Well, we've got quite an evening ahead, and I'm aware that also lots of people come a very long way to be here. We've got people here from Basildon. We've got people who come from Canvey Island. We've got people from Holland, which actually is genuinely impressive. Okay. Spain, people come over from France. It's just amazing. So, just absolutely fantastic. So, the first thing I want to do is actually read a bit of Lee's writing. Because in this book, I wanted it to be a biography, but I also wanted it to be a little bit different, and I wanted it to sort of be like a bit of a mock manual for the rock and roll gentleman, sort of, going about, how would one live one's life, or go about one's daily business in a sort of gentlemanly yet rock and roll manner. And I thought that Lee was probably the ultimate role model in that respect. So it takes quite a lot from his character there, but I was very fortunate to be allowed to see some wonderful archive stuff, not least lots of Lee's exercise books from school, courtesy of Phil Ashcroft. And Lee and Phil had quite an anarchic sense of humour. Phil is here this evening, I don't know where, but basically they turned these exercise books into what they called Crolly art books, and of course Lee was known as Collie back in those days. Lee Collinson was his real name, and they used to write these very sort of Glenn Baxter-esque, sort of Spike Milligan style kind of flights of fancy and whimsy, and lots of crazy diagrams and weird stories and hilarious verse, which is a bit sort of like Edward Lear. So what was amazing was I actually found amid all these amazing books a prologue that Lee had written for one of these books. And when I read it, I realised it was actually quite appropriate for this book, and I thought I really liked the idea that although, of course, Lee can't be here, that he could sort of supply some manner of preface for his own book. So I'm going to read a bit of that to you now. So this is what Lee says, in a sort of mock po-faced manner. In this book, we have included some of the stories that for one reason or another we have decided to exclude from the Crolly art books. These stories are divided into two categories, the absurdist style and the Crolly style. I hope that you do not find these stories funny, as they are not meant to be humorous. This applies to the Crolly art books, and they are intended purely as stimulants of the imagination, apart from being examples of absurdist writing. Remember that some of these stories may sound stupid and silly at first sight, but dig deeper under this mask of absurdism and impossibility, and you will find the meaning of the story and its application to modern day life. In this book, we attempt to destroy or at least break down the modern day faults of society, i.e. officiality, conformity to a ridiculous degree, and pettiness. This book also aims to destroy, with obliterating vitality, the answer that is a classic of our time: oh, it's always done this way. So that's Lee Collinson, Esquire, aged 14, I think. But some of the principles I'm definitely bringing into this book here. So it's amazing. There's so much surrealist writing from that time of Lee's. But the bit I'm going to read for you now takes us to the early 70s, around the time that the Feelgoods would have been playing at the Esplanade. I spoke to Will Birch, who's standing over there. Will and Paul Shuttleworth put on a gig night here, and among many now Southend luminaries such as Mickey Jupp, the Feelgoods played here as well. So I shall read a bit from that. The level of the Feelgoods musicianship and stagecraft had been dialed up considerably, and people were noticing the difference. Audiences no longer had to be dragged in off the street to watch them play, and they were less likely to talk through their set once they were in. Will Birch noted in his diary on the 10th of September 1972 that Dr. Feelgood had played the Esplanade that night and were very mean, good bunts. Will was living at the time at his parents' home in the sedate area of Thorpe Bay, just east of the not-so-sedate South End, and Lee, Sparko and Chris would often take the opportunity, while on the mainland, to pop in for a late-night coffee after a drinking session before roaring back to Canvey, maybe watch the old Grey Whistle test together, or just hang out before a Sunday evening show at the Esplanade. Lee was partial to watching Hawaii 5-0. Missing it was not an option. Lee was amused by the lingo and especially loved the central character of Steve McGarrett. An intriguing element of Lee's personality was his penchant for taking on characters from books, films or television programmes that appealed to him and melding them into his own persona for comedy effect, sartorial purposes or otherwise. Subversive offbeats such as Yossarian, Pat Patrick McGowan in The Prisoner, Brighton Rock's menacing Pinky Brown, enigmatic mavericks from pulp novels or Raymond Chandler stories, and now Detective Captain Steve McGarrett. They were all in there somewhere. Lee was taken with the dialogue. It became part of his parlance, continues Will. You know, book 'em, Dano, murder 1, 2 counts, put out an APB, all this stuff. It all fed into it. Put out an APB on my pint of beer. Arguably, the suited-up, short-haired McGarrett played a part in informing the ultimate Brilleaux image. The Feelgoods started playing at the Top Alex on Alexandra Street, Southend, in 1973. And that, as Will remembers it, was when they got really hot. The Top Alex was a haunt of the local bikers, Hells Angels and hippies. You couldn't move for Afghan coats, and it was possibly the hairiest night spot in Southend, so it was an interesting place for another key shift in Lee's image to come into play. Will Birch continues, my brother Howard had a cream 3-button Italian jacket. He traded it with Lee upstairs at the Alex. The minute Lee put that jacket on, that was when his persona was born. Eventually he got the famous white one, but that cream jacket was the start. Rock and roll needs a sense of threat to truly excite. There arguably wasn't much on the scene that really had that quality at the time. There were groups who could entertain, yes, but were you worried about bumping into the singer on a dark night? Did you fear that if you met the guitarist's gaze, you might inadvertently enter into some Faustian contract? Possibly not, but something dangerous had been unleashed in the Feelgoods, and it was as captivating as it was disorientating. When Lee wasn't barking out lyrics, fist pounding the air, he was launching frenzied attacks on the gob iron, or staring, juddering obscenely, altogether ignoring Wilco as he careered across the stage, his guitar apparently having been possessed by a malevolent spirit that was somehow steering him around. The band would walk on stage apparently wearing what they'd come from work in. Bricklayer Sparko was generally in jeans, shirt and a waistcoat before adopting what he refers to as his bastard suit, a frilly shirted wedding whistle in hospital blue. The suits and sunglasses look mirror-lensed aviator style, also tied in with the feel-good sleazy appeal, that of the suave baddie, the modern highwayman, Flash Harry, the lady killers, good guy turned bad with a top note of white-collar worker gone insane. Lee often had the crazed, undone look of a corrupt, pill-popping DI who'd been up all night on a case, grubby shirt pulled open at the neck, tie yanked loose, sweat rapidly wiped from his brow as he snarled, swaggered, and pointed an accusatory finger at no one in particular. As the feel-good buzz began to intensify, rumours circulated about their collective background, and excitable suspicions fizzed along the lines that, as McFarren salaciously noted, it was possible to believe they might have come together in jail. They weren't about to point out they'd met as youngsters and had once been the pride of Canvey Carnival. One former Canvey dweller told me that whenever an act of vandalism was spotted on Canvey Island, it was speculated by fevered teens that the feel-goods had done it. Lee was always at pains to point out that the image was unconscious, even adding, "These are the only trousers I've got," adding that the jacket had been nicked from a streaker in Durham who'd left his clothes on the stage. Of course, we never sat down and said, "Right, we're going to go on looking like deranged bank clerks or whatever," Lee explained, and he's saying it like it's a bad thing. So jumping forward a little bit, yes, visual changes taking place, and the feel-goods were also playing around with stage names. Giving people new and humorous names, again reflecting characters from St. Trinian's, the short stories of Damon Runyon, P.G. Wodehouse novels and the pages, the Beano, had long been a favoured pastime of Lee's, but another reason for these name-changing antics was that it helped avoid confusion. There were 3 Johns in the band, and Lee's middle name was John as well. The inscrutable John Martin had long been known as the Big Figure anyway, Figure for short, on account of his formidable stature, but it also had the requisite air of mystery. John B. Sparks became Sparko, John Wilkinson was referred to as Wilco, which led him to swap his first and second name around, making it Wilco Johnson, and Lee took on the surname Brilleaux, initially as a bit of a joke. Lee was convinced that after an especially sweaty show, his hair matted up in the heat to the extent that it looked like the wire wool of a Brillo pad. Wilco remembers, Lee was talking about Brillo pads and then he went, "Lee Brilleaux." And we went, "Yes!" After deciding to adopt the name for good, Lee soon decided it would be better if he, I quote, "frogged it up a bit," changing the spelling to Brilleaux. It was still rather droll, but the new spelling had a sheen of glamour, putting one in mind of a New Orleans bluesman rather than the kind of thing one might find under the kitchen sink. The name Brilleaux was soon etched onto the dashboard of the feel-good transit van, alongside Brilleaux pads. One must always remember one's roots. Will Birch, in the meantime, had been working in an office, playing drums, probably not while in the office, and trying to get a gig on the now thriving London pub rock scene. Pub rock was a petri dish for a diverse range of acts to build a following at a grassroots level, and the movement, as it were, served as something of a reaction to the popular stadium bands of the day. Groups such as Ducks Deluxe, Brinsley Schwartz, Eggs Over Easy, Joe Strummer's pre-clash band The 101ers, Bees Make Honey, and Kilburn and the High Roads all took the opportunity to pack out drinking holes like the Kensington, the Lord Nelson, the Newlands Tavern, the Hope and Anchor, and many other Victorian pubs across town. Will knew just the band that would blow the scene wide open. Just jumping forward a little bit. People started hooking onto them, adds Jeff Shaw. They always were a bit crazy, but in London they really cranked it up. The persona was, he was a bunch of guys who would not be very nice to go out with for an evening. They might even hurt you. Lee would be throwing bottles, lying on the floor, shagging the bass drum. Wilco was like a zomboid on rails, quite beautiful in his movements. Sparko was punching all the time. Figure, you never saw his eyes. Greased back hair, he looked like a horrible mafioso. It was killer. I've never seen anything before or since as bad as that on stage. It didn't translate to a big stage. It was still good, but in the pubs, it was incredible. Thank you very much. If you want any more, you have to buy the book. Thank you so much. That's from Lee Brilleaux, Happy Old Gentleman. That's my new book. And I forgot to say a big thank you to Polygon, who are the publisher, and they put so much enthusiasm into putting this out and a great deal of love, and really kind of let me just sort of do my thing and let me be quite free with it. So I hope you enjoy it. Many of you will know what we're seeing behind us. This is Going Back Home. Fantastic. I hope Lee wasn't doing anything too obscene behind me while I was doing my reading. Was he actually doing it? Oh, Lee! Really? So, thank you so much for listening. We have more excitement ahead. What time is it? Well, probably in about 15 minutes we shall have music from Steve Weston and the Blue Sonics. Always amazing. And I'm told that we have a short video as well in honour of Lee that have been put together by the fabulous Dean Kennedy and Liam Heatherson. And later on, should you all be drunk enough, Dirty White Jacket contest. Yeah, sort of muted-ish response. We'll see how you get on. But there's a book up for grabs should you wish to enter the competition. And with that, I shall leave you. Thank you so much for being here. Have a vol au vent. Enjoy your evening. Thank you.